The Vorta Council never expected weak little Earth to hit back so fucking hard. They were shocked when human fleets poured into their system, all guns blazing. But in a remote corner of Vorta space, the battle had already begun. Derek Brown, an ex-Marine hauling fusion reactors, tasted blood as his ship took another hit. The Vorta bastard just kept firing. "Primus, you dumb shit! Hold your fire! It's me, Derek!" he yelled into comms for the third time. Captain Primus of the Vorta Star Command kept mum and lit Derek's hull up with plasma. The trucker yanked the stick hard, narrowly dodging. "Something's off," Derek muttered. The black of space glittered with the sheen of 1,000 ships amassing over the Vorta homeworld. A fleet this size could only mean one thing. But first, he had to lose this asshole. The rear cannons finally nailed the patroller on the 7th shot, cracking its shields. Derek punched the throttle and shot straight for Kuiper Station. Moments after docking, Derek sprinted to the command center. "Admiral, the Vorta are out there, a whole fucking invasion force." Admiral Jameson tensed. "Recon now, stealth ship, get a closer look," he ordered. "I'll alert Earth." Derek saluted and turned to leave, but the station's sirens blared to life. Admiral Jameson paled as he read the incoming report. "They're here," someone screamed over comms. On screen, a Vorta dreadnought spearheaded a column of destroyers and frigates. Derek stared at the fleet coming to vaporize Kuiper Station. He had to get out there and get eyes on these bastards. Earth needed to know what they were up against. If the Vorta struck now, unprovoked, millions of humans would be caught in the slaughter, totally unaware. Humanity's only hope was advance warning. The ex-Marine gritted his teeth and ran for the stealth ship hangar. The fate of humanity itself hung in the balance. Admiral Jameson barked orders over the chaos of blaring sirens. "Evacuate all non-essential personnel. I want every civilian on an escape pod and launched within the next 10 minutes. Security, arm up and prepare to repel boarders." Derek sprinted through the corridors, shoving past the flood of panicked station residents. As they ran for the escape pods, he skidded into the stealth ship hangar and leaped into the nearest vessel, not even bothering with a flight suit. His hands flew across the controls and the nimble craft shot out of the hangar, hugging the station's hull to avoid the incoming plasma bombardment. As the stealth ship broke free of the station's sensor shadow, Derek got his first good look at the Vorta armada. The destroyers and frigates were scattered haphazardly, not in any discernible formation. Lances of blue plasma streaked between the ships, the telltale sign of Vorta weapons, being fired on other Vorta ships. "What the hell?" Derek muttered. He punched a command into the console, and the ship's advanced sensors reached out, plucking the Vorta's comms right out of the ether. "Don't care about your orders, Primus," a guttural voice snarled. "The Council has strictly forbidden any military action against the Terrans." "The Council is weak, Commander Valgus," Captain Primus spat back. "I will lead the Vorta to glory, and I'll start by burning that human station to ashes." Derek's heart pounded in his ears. This wasn't an invasion, it was a fucking coup. Back on Earth, alarm klaxons reverberated through UNSC High Command. "Admiral Jameson reports a massive Vorta fleet at Kuiper Station," an aide announced, her face pale. "They've already engaged." The assembled brass erupted into a cacophony of shouts. "We have to strike back immediately," Admiral Vickers demanded, slamming a fist on the table. "Send the 5th Fleet to Kuiper and smash those Vorta bastards." "And risk all-out war with the Vorta Confederacy?" Ambassador Traynor protested. "We have to at least attempt diplomacy first. This could all be a misunderstanding." As the debate raged on, Derek was already putting the pieces together. He stared at the massive Vorta dreadnought hanging in space, realization dawning. This wasn't just about attacking Kuiper Station. Primus needed a forward operating base because he was planning to invade human space itself. Derek gritted his teeth. Like hell was he going to let that happen? The stealth ship sliced through the void, angling toward the dreadnought's exposed flank. Derek needed to find a way aboard that ship, find some way to throw a wrench into Primus's plans, buy Earth some time. In the chaos of the Vorta infighting, one lone human ship slipped through the cracks, making a desperate play to save their species. Derek was going to need every bit of skill and luck he had to pull this off. Back in Kuiper Station's command center, Admiral Jameson watched grimly as the Vorta ships disgorged waves of breaching pods. They were about to be boarded, and the Vorta would be pissed. His remaining security forces took up position around the command deck, rifles raised and ready. They had to hold the line for Earth. Derek's stealth ship sliced through the void, its matte black hull rendering it all but invisible against the backdrop of space. The ex-marine's heart pounded as he guided the nimble craft toward the looming bulk of the Vorta dreadnought. He had one shot at this, and he couldn't afford to screw it up. The ship shuddered as it latched onto the dreadnought's hull, the magnetic clamps locking it in place. Derek grabbed his rifle and slipped out the airlock, his mag boots clanging against the metal as he made his way to the nearest maintenance hatch. The hatch hissed open, and Derek dropped into the bowels of the massive ship. The corridors were eerily quiet, the only sound the thrum of the engines vibrating through the deck plates. Derek's grip tightened on his rifle as he stalked forward, his marine training kicking in as he scanned for threats. He froze as he rounded a corner, coming face to face with a squad of Vorta soldiers. But instead of raising their weapons, the soldiers lowered them, their leader stepping forward with his hands raised. "You're the human from Kuiper Station," the Vorta said, his voice deep and gravelly. "I am Commander Zarkos, loyal to the true Vorta government. We've been watching you." Derek kept his rifle trained on the Vorta, his finger hovering over the trigger. "Give me one good reason why I shouldn't put a plasma bolt through your skull." Zarkos's eyes narrowed. "Because we have a common enemy. Primus and his faction have gone rogue, and they're building a superweapon capable of destroying entire planets. They plan to use it to crush any resistance to their rule, starting with your people." Derek's blood ran cold. A superweapon? Fuck. Why should I trust you? Zarkos stepped closer, his gaze intense. "Because if Primus succeeds, it won't just be the humans who suffer. He'll turn that weapon on anyone who opposes him, including my own people. We need to stop him, and we need your help to do it." Derek hesitated, his mind racing. He didn't trust the Vorta, not by a long shot. But if what Zarkos was saying was true, he didn't have a choice. "Fine. But if you double-cross me, I'll make sure you regret it." Zarkos nodded grimly. "Understood. Now come, we have work to do." Back at Kuiper Station, Admiral Jameson gripped the edge of the command console, his knuckles white as he watched the battle unfolding on the view screen. The station's defenses were holding, but barely. The Vorta ships were relentless, pounding the station with a barrage of plasma fire. "Sir, we can't take much more of this," one of the officers shouted over the din of alarms. "Shields are at 20% and falling fast." Jameson gritted his teeth. "Keep firing. We have to hold out until reinforcements arrive." He turned to the comms officer, his face grim. "Send a message to UNSC Command. Tell them we need those ships, and we need them now. If they don't get here soon, there won't be a Kuiper Station left to save." Light years away in the heart of human space, the UNSC fleet hung in the void, poised to strike. Admiral Vickers stood on the bridge of his flagship, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. "All ships prepare to jump on my mark," he said, his voice steady. "We'll hit the Vorta with everything we've got. Let's show these bastards what happens when you mess with humanity." As the fleet powered up their jump drives, ready to leap into battle, Derek and Zarkos raced through the corridors of the Vorta dreadnought, desperate to reach the superweapon before it was too late. The fate of two species hung in the balance, and failure was not an option. The deck plates shuddered beneath Derek's feet, as he and Zarkos sprinted through the bowels of the Vorta flagship, the sound of plasma fire echoing through the corridors. They burst into a massive hangar bay, only to find themselves face to face with Primus's elite guard. "Shit!" Derek hissed, diving behind a stack of crates as a hail of plasma bolts sizzled overhead. Zarkos took cover beside him, his face grim. "We have to get to the control room," the Vorta commander growled. "If Primus activates that superweapon, it's all over." Derek nodded, popping up to snap off a few shots at the advancing guards. "I'll draw their fire, you make a run for it." Zarkos hesitated for a moment, then clasped Derek's shoulder. "Good luck, human. May your guards watch over you." With that, the Vorta commander burst from cover, sprinting for the far side of the hangar as Derek laid down a blistering hail of suppressive fire. Plasma bolts sizzled past Zarkos's head as he ran, but he never slowed, disappearing through a hatch on the far wall. Derek gritted his teeth and kept firing, the acrid smell of ozone filling his nostrils as his rifle grew hot in his hands. He dropped guard after guard, their bodies hitting the deck with sickening thuds. Just as the last guard fell, a bone-rattling explosion shook the ship. Derek stumbled, nearly losing his footing as the deck heaved beneath him. "Zarkos, what the hell was that?" he barked into his comm. "Primus. He's activated the super-weapon." Zarkos's voice crackled back, laced with static. "I'm in the control room, but I can't stop the firing sequence. It's already targeted Earth." Derek's blood ran cold. Earth. His home, his family. He thought of his little sister, his parents, his friends, all of them, about to be wiped out in an instant. "Like hell," he growled, sprinting for the hatch Zarkos had disappeared through. He burst into the control room, his eyes widening at the sight of the massive superweapon, its barrel glowing with an eerie blue light as it prepared to fire. Zarkos was hunched over a control panel, his fingers flying over the keys. "I can't stop it," he said, his voice desperate. "The firing sequence is locked in." Derek stared at the weapon, his mind racing. There was only one way to stop this, only one way to save Earth. He shoved Zarkos aside, his fingers punching in a new set of coordinates. The Vorta commander's eyes widened as he realized what Derek was doing. "No," he breathed, "you can't." Derek just smiled grimly, his hand hovering over the launch button. "Tell Earth, tell them I did my duty." He slammed his palm down on the button, and the world exploded in a blaze of white light. The superweapon fired, but not at Earth. Its deadly payload tore through the flagship's hull, ripping the ship apart from the inside out. In the heart of the inferno, Derek closed his eyes, a strange sense of peace washing over him. He had done it. Earth was safe. His family was safe. That was all that mattered. As the flames consumed him, he thought of his sister, of her bright smile and infectious laugh. "I'm sorry, kiddo," he whispered. "Looks like I won't be coming home after all." And then the world went black. Light years away, in the skies above the Vorta homeworld, the UNSC fleet emerged from slipspace, their guns blazing as they tore into Primus's forces. The Vorta ships reeled under the onslaught, their shields flickering and failing as the human vessels pounded them with precision strikes. On the bridge of the UNSC flagship, Admiral Vickers watched the battle unfold with grim satisfaction. "Keep firing," he ordered, his eyes hard. "I want every last one of those bastards dead or running." As if in answer to his command, a second Vorta fleet suddenly dropped out of slipspace, their ships arrayed in a tight formation. For a moment Vickers tensed, thinking they were reinforcements for Primus. But then a familiar voice crackled over the comm. "This is Commander Zarkos of the Vorta Loyalist Fleet. We're here to assist, Admiral." Vickers let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Glad to have you with us, Commander. Let's finish this." Together, the human and Vorta ships tore into Primus's forces, their combined firepower overwhelming the rogue fleet. One by one, the enemy ships winked out of existence, reduced to clouds of glowing debris. In the end, only a handful of Primus's ships managed to escape, limping away into the void. The rest were nothing but shattered hulks, drifting through the silent void. Back at Kuiper Station, Admiral Jameson gripped the edge of the command console, his knuckles white as he watched the Vorta ships pounding on the station's faltering shields. Sparks flew from overloaded consoles, and the acrid stench of smoke filled the air. "Shields at 5%, a voice called out, barely audible over the blaring alarms. "We can't take much more of this, sir." Jameson gritted his teeth, his eyes fixed on the view screen. "Come on, Vickers," he muttered under his breath. "Where the hell are you?" As if in answer to his plea, a new wave of contact suddenly appeared on the sensor display. Human contacts, UNSC ships, dropping out of slipspace and charging towards the beleaguered station. Jameson let out a whoop of joy as the human fleet opened fire, their guns tearing into the Vorta ships with ruthless precision. The enemy vessels reeled under the onslaught, their formation breaking apart as they scrambled to respond to the new threat. It was over in minutes. The Vorta ships that weren't destroyed outright fled back into slipspace, leaving behind a field of glowing wreckage. In the sudden silence that followed, Jameson sagged back in his chair, his head bowed. They had won. Kuiper Station was safe. Earth was safe. But the cost had been high, too high. He thought of the brave men and women who had given their lives to defend the station, to defend their home. And he thought of Derek, the ex-Marine who had sacrificed everything to stop the superweapon. "Attention all hands," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "This is Admiral Jameson. The Vorta have been defeated. The threat to Earth is over. But we must never forget those who gave their lives to make this victory possible. We must never forget their courage, their sacrifice. They are the true heroes of this day." He closed his eyes, a single tear trickling down his cheek. "Wherever you are, Derek," he whispered, "I hope you know that your sacrifice was not in vain. Earth will remember you. We will all remember you." And with that he turned back to the viewscreen, watching as the UNSC ships took up defensive positions around the battered station. There was still work to be done, still a long road ahead. But for now, in this moment, they could breathe. They could mourn their dead and celebrate their victory. They could stand tall, knowing that they had faced the darkness and emerged unbroken. For they were human, and they would never ever surrender. In the aftermath of the climactic battle, the Vorta and human fleets hung in the void, the wreckage of destroyed ships drifting between them like a silent graveyard. On the bridge of the UNSC flagship, Admiral Vickers stood beside Commander Zarkos, their faces grim as they surveyed the carnage. "So much death," Vickers muttered, shaking his head. "And for what? The mad ambitions of a single Vorta warlord?" Zarkos said nothing, his eyes fixed on the viewscreen. The weight of the lives lost hung heavy on his shoulders, a burden he would carry for the rest of his days. A week later, the Vorta and human delegations met on neutral ground, a small uninhabited planet on the edge of Vorta space. The atmosphere was tense as the two sides faced each other across the negotiating table, the scars of the recent conflict still raw. Zarkos, his uniform crisp and his bearing proud, stepped forward. "The Vorta Confederacy seeks peace with humanity," he declared, his voice ringing out in the silence. "We have seen the destruction that war brings, and we have no desire to repeat it." The human ambassador, a stern-faced woman with steel-grey hair, eyed him warily. "And why should we trust you?" she asked, her tone sharp. "Your people attacked us without provocation, slaughtered our civilians. How do we know this isn't just another ploy?" Zarkos met her gaze unflinchingly. "I cannot undo the actions of Primus and his followers," he said, "but I can assure you that they do not represent the will of the Vorta people. We seek only to live in peace, to forge a new future together." The negotiations dragged on for days, the two sides trading barbs and concessions in equal measure. But even as the talks progressed, tensions remained high. Many on both sides questioned the wisdom of making peace with an enemy that had proven so treacherous. And then a bombshell. A battered, limping ship dropped out of slipspace at the edge of the system, broadcasting a single desperate message. "Derek Brown is alive." The news sent shockwaves through both delegations. Derek, the hero who had sacrificed himself to destroy the Vorta superweapon, was alive. It seemed impossible. But as the ship drew closer, the truth became clear. Derek had survived the explosion, rescued by a secretive faction within the Vorta government known as the Shadow. For weeks, they had worked to heal his wounds and piece together the true story behind the conflict. Now Derek stood before the assembled delegations, his face scarred and his body broken, but his spirit unbroken. "The Shadow has been manipulating this conflict from the beginning," he declared, his voice hoarse. They used Primus as a pawn, a tool to destabilize the Vorta government and seize power for themselves. The human ambassador frowned. "And why should we believe you?" she asked. "You could be lying, a trick by the Vorta to lure us into a false sense of security." Derek met her gaze, his eyes haunted. "Because I have proof. The Shadow is not some faceless Vorta boogeyman. It's Admiral Jameson." The room erupted into chaos, shouts of disbelief and anger filling the air. Jameson, the hero of the Battle of Kuiper Station, the man who had led the defense of Earth itself. It seemed impossible. But as Derek laid out his evidence, the truth became all too clear. Jameson had been working with the Shadow for years, orchestrating the conflict from behind the scenes. He had used Derek and Zarkos as pawns, manipulating them to achieve his own ends. And now, with the truth exposed, Jameson was making his move. Even as Derek spoke, the Admiral's forces were mobilizing, preparing to strike at both the Vorta and the UNSC in a bid for total domination. In the face of this new threat, old enmities were forgotten. Derek and Zarkos, once bitter enemies, now stood side by side, united in their determination to stop Jameson before it was too late. The final battle was fought not in the void of space, but in the corridors and chambers of Jameson's flagship. Derek and Zarkos led a desperate boarding action, fighting their way through the Admiral's elite guard in a bid to reach the bridge. In the end, it was Derek who confronted his former commander, the two men facing off in a duel to the death. Jameson was a skilled fighter, his blade flashing in the dim light, but Derek was driven by a righteous fury, a determination to see justice done, no matter the cost. In the end, it was that fury that proved the difference. Derek's blade found its mark, piercing Jameson's heart even as the Admiral's sword slid between his ribs. As the two men lay dying, Jameson's eyes found Derek's, a flicker of something like regret passing over his face. "I only wanted to keep humanity safe," he whispered, blood bubbling from his lips, "to make sure we would never be caught off guard again." Derek shook his head, his vision beginning to fade. "You became the very thing you sought to destroy," he said, his voice barely more than a whisper. "A monster, consumed by fear and hate." With a final shudder, Jameson breathed his last, his body going limp. Derek slumped to the deck beside him, his life's blood pooling on the cold metal. Even as his eyes closed for the final time, he could hear Zarkos's voice calling out to him from somewhere far away. "Derek, hold on, my friend, help is coming." But it was too late. Derek Brown, the hero of humanity and the savior of the Vorta, was gone, his sacrifice complete. In the aftermath of the battle, a new era dawned. The Vorta and the UNSC, united by the bonds of shared loss and common purpose, forged a new alliance, one built on trust and mutual respect. There would be challenges ahead, old wounds to heal and new threats to face. But for now, in this moment, there was peace. And though Derek Brown was gone, his legacy lived on. A statue was erected in his honor on Earth, a towering monument to the man who had given everything to save his people. And on the Vorta homeworld, a similar monument stood, a testament to the enduring spirit of a hero who had brought light to the darkness. For in the end, that was what Derek Brown had been. A hero, a shining example of the best of humanity, and though he was gone, his memory would live on, a beacon of hope in a galaxy that had seen too much darkness. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.